to PMPA's Final Cut of the Week, where we share important information you may have missed while you were making essential parts. I'm Dorian Davis Jr.
And I'm Renee Merker, and this is what you need to know for the week ending May 10th, 2024. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the monthly full report for new orders for manufactured goods in March were up 2 consecutive months and increased 1.6%. This followed a 1.2% February increase. Shipments were also up 2 consecutive months and increased 0.3%. This followed a 1.4% February increase. Inventories were up 2 consecutive months and increased $0.4 billion, which is virtually unchanged. This followed a 0.2% February increase. If this is an economic slowdown, we're a fan. New orders up is a leading indicator. Shipments up is a coincident indicator, and inventories remaining level tell us there is no need to panic about a slowdown suddenly appearing.
In March, world steel production was down 4.3% from a year earlier. China was down 7.8%, with the rest of the world rising 0.6%. Since China is the largest producer of steel, their decrease pulled the index down. Europe outside of the EU has seen a 20.5% increase in production this year. The United States production was flat in March and is currently down about 1.6% for the year.
The U.S. Census Bureau and the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis announced today that the goods and services deficit was $0.1 billion from February, revised. March exports were $5.3 billion less than February exports, and March imports were $5.4 billion less than February imports. Capital goods imports, census basis seasonally adjusted, in March came in at $75.7 billion and were the highest on record. March imports of other goods at $10.4 billion were the lowest since December of 2022 at $10 billion. The March deficit with Mexico at $14.7 billion was the highest on record. Our take? We believe that the correct reading of the facts for the goods and services deficit is essentially unchanged. We cannot decry the imports from Mexico being highest on record when we are trying, as a matter of national security policy, to decouple from China. Policy actions have consequences, which inevitably show up.
A recent update to Microsoft's Windows server can cause process crashes, forcing the domain controller to reboot. This happens when the local security authority subsystem service crashes, which forces the reboot. Evidently, Microsoft is working on fixes for the problem. Although the April updates included critical security updates, if you are possibly vulnerable to the reboot issue in mission-critical applications, you might want to wait until the fixes are complete.
YouTuber Chris Borg has created a 3D printed lathe. The spindle is based around an ER collet chuck, and the bed is made from 80/20 channels. This is a cool use of 3D printing technology that should ignite conversations in our industry.
On this week's Speaking of Precision podcast, Miles Free, Carly Kissler-Miller, and David Wynn talk about 7 little-known regulations that have a massive effect on our shops. This podcast and our Speaking of Suppliers podcast can be found on major podcast platforms or on PMPA.org.
Now it's time for our weekly tip. What are the 2 most critical inputs into your quoting process? To read Miles Free's answer, go to PMPA.org's Knowledge Centers or Final Cut of the Week.
And that's our take on what you need to know for the week ending May 10th, 2024. For additional information and links about any of the topics discussed today, go to PMPA.org and click on Final Cut of the Week.
Thanks for checking in. We'll see you next Friday.
Vulnerable and wow. Hold
You
on.
got through all the harsh stuff.
Right? I was so close. You might want to. I was at the end. What?
I was rooting for you.
I was rooting for myself too. Like, I got this.